Welcome back to Grok Talk, brought to you by the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers and the bloggers at GraniteGrok.com, one of whom is on the phone with us, Kimberly Warren. And we were talking about the balsams, and I think there's tons of things we could talk about, and I think we should, actually, because I just turn Mike's not even in the room when I turn his microphone on. When he's here, I forget to turn it on. Great, right. So, Kimberly.
Yes.
All right. What else you want to talk about?
We can talk about whatever else you want.
I know. Well, I mean, what are you working on? What have you recently talked? I mean, we have Mark here. He's in the studio.
About that.
We can talk. We can start talking about that. Absolutely. The nice people of Derry elected some officials for the purpose of helping them deal with their tax burden, and they have attempted to do that. And as is so often the case, the inside powers that be, in this case unions and people connected to them, have objected.
That's fair to say.
That's fair to say. So, Kimberly wrote a great piece about it. I'm snipping again about it yesterday on Examiner, and of course Mark is here. So
hi,
how you doing?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Good. So you have the unenviable position of being on a town council in a town that has taxpayers who don't like their tax rate.
Yes, it's Derry on the municipal side and on the school side of budgeting has really kind of beaten the hell out of the taxpayer for at least 20 years, certainly 10. If you look back at what the tax rate was on the municipal side in 2004, it was $5.93 per thousand on a home. As of 2012, it was all the way up to $10.39 per thousand on a home. That's a huge increase.
Mm-hmm.
And people were very vocal, at least when I ran back in 2013, that the biggest issue on their mind was taxes. And I went to a lot of doors. I talked to a lot of people. I talked to mechanics. I talked to accountants. I talked to retirees. I talked to new homeowners. And you know what? They disagreed on all kinds of issues like bonds and abortion and gun rights. But you know what? They all agreed that the taxes needed to come down. And so in 2012, the tax rate was said to go up. It was going to go up about 9 cents. And we fought and kicked and screamed as a 4-3 majority to level fund the budget. Just level funding the budget and not increasing it every year was a victory. For years before, prior councils would claim victory for increasing taxes but not going past the tax cap.
Mm-hmm.
And my view of a tax cap has always been kind of a pock on our house. If you're the kind of town that needed a tax cap in the first place, that tells me your spending was out of control. So to say that we didn't exceed the tax cap was nothing to be proud of.
Mm-hmm. The tax cap. You're back, sorry.
The tax cap is there as a limit. If you go over it, you're breaking the law.
Exactly.
It's not, I'm proud that I didn't drive 100 miles an hour today.
Right. Yeah. So then in 2013, we were actually able to, or 2014, we were able to lower the tax rate by 15 cents, bringing the tax rate down. And now what we're trying to do is lower it. We set a goal, unanimously, by the way, but once the pressure kicks up, you lose that unanimity, by $2. We're trying to make sure that Derry is a competitive town. We're next to Salem. We're next to Londonderry. Businesses are going to these other towns. People would have you believe it's because, they spend more on economic development and things like that. And what we've been saying is no, businesses will go where the tax burden is the least. And so we felt that if we're really going to be serious about economic development, let's approach a novel idea and try to lower our taxes. If we want families to stay in Derry, let's lower our taxes. And so that's what we've been trying to do. I've never been shy about that for the last 2 years now. And what I will say is every time we have a budget session, if you want to cut a lawnmower, if you want to cut and say, no, we don't need to buy a whole new fleet, or we don't need to lease a whole new fleet of police cruisers, you hear the same thing. No, that's going to compromise public safety. No, we need to have the best. No, if you don't buy the stuff this year, you're going to set us behind next year. And so you've always heard these typical bureaucratic budgetary arguments. And so this year, I think people really got antsy. They realize that you can't lower the tax rate without making some cuts to staffing, perhaps taking a second look as to how these collective bargaining contracts have been executed and negotiated for the last 20 years. And so what has happened is you've had a lot of people coming out, fear-mongering, saying that your town council wants you to die in your home. Your town council wants crime rates to run through the roof, and buildings are going to burn. And you've seen a lot of fear-mongering and hysteria.
They actually, firefighters put out, or I don't know who it was, one of the unions put out a petition on MoveOn.org that said, what's going to happen when you call 911 and no one's on the other end? Sorry, I mean, that's the kind of stuff they do. And people in Derry, they're not reading over the budget and looking at the union contracts. They have no idea the cushy deal that unions in that town have. So that's why I reported on it last week, to show people. And by the way, I've gotten feedback, and people are not happy. They're not happy. They're like, what? They get paid money if they don't take the health insurance? That's not normal. And that's costing Derry almost $500,000 a year.
Oh, absolutely. We have, and this was there before I got there. We've been trying to address it, but we have money that gets paid to employees for it's longevity pay. You have holiday pay. You have overtime. I was looking at the proposal right now for the most recent proposal of the budget. Police are asking for approximately almost $100,000 extra in their overtime, and the fire department is also asking for an extra $120,000 extra in overtime, up from what it was last year. And yet, just last week, we were being told we just need to save jobs, and we were being told what you really should do is cut the town's contribution to charities and things of that nature. No, we're going to need to cut roads and road funding in order to meet this $2 goal.
Because the roads are not done by union workers in Derry, is that correct?
Well, I don't know what the motive was.
Or shall we set one set of union workers against another for this? This should be fun.
Tell them, though, the overtime that Derry spends on just the fire department and police department alone is almost $1.5 million a year.
That's correct. And then we have people who have an annual wage and they're salaried, and they still get overtime. And I'm not talking the low man on the totem pole. We have, I'll break it down. We have 44 firefighters. All right, so 44 firefighters. We have 4 battalion chiefs. We have 4 captains. We have 12 lieutenants. So that means to manage 44 men, we have 20 supervisors. In the police department, we have 40 police officers, but we have 8 sergeants, 5 lieutenants, 2 captains. So that's 15 supervisors to manage 40 men and women. And guess what? All ranks get the overtime. One battalion chief last year, $20,000 in overtime. We're talking $10,000 in overtime. I have the figures in front of me. Same on the police side of it. Detectives making $19,000, $15,000 in overtime. And listen, nobody is saying that you can't make a good living in public service, but if that much overtime is being paid, you either look at the union contracts and say how union time is allotted, how overtime is allotted is a problem, or we're just not staffing people appropriately.
Maybe you're just not using the resources properly. Why do you have all this overtime? I've been in restaurant management. I work in a computer company now, and I'm like the whole department. I have to manage my time effectively to do 10 or 15 different jobs, and the jobs still need to get done, but I have to manage my time. And if it gets to a point where I can't do that, then I need some assistance, and then that's a different situation. But the thing that bugs me about the whole union, I was in a union for 10 years. I worked for UPS, so I'm a Teamster. I know people who are police officers who did their 25 years. They're in their late 40s, early 50s. They're collecting a really nice pension, and then they go out and get a job making that much or more. And I'm like, I don't have a problem with giving you a pension because you did this job and it's a dangerous job and you should be compensated for that. But I don't think you should be able to collect that until you're at least 65. Because, for 20 years, this guy's going to collect more money than I'm going to make working. Plus, he's going to work another job if he wants to, part-time maybe, security, and all of that, all those pension dollars are a huge burden on the towns in the state. And I don't think you should be paying viable workforce people to sit around. They're not sitting around. They can get another job. Why do they need their pension until they're older? It drives me crazy, and that's just one aspect. The overtime's a problem. I know they got the contracts and we made the deals, and maybe we need to honor those. But moving forward, it's unsustainable. I mean, at some point, people get fired, and that's what you guys are looking at. You're looking at the possibility that in order to do what the taxpayers want, you have to terminate employment.
And that's the one thing you don't want to do. So it's interesting, actually. We talk about these pensions. The only company I have worked for in the last 40 years.
I know you like it when I cut you off, but I'm missing my segment break.
Oh, okay, fine.
So we're going to continue this discussion with you. Hold that thought. We'll be right back. Yeah. Kimberly, you can stay online if you want. We'll be right back. This is Grok Talk.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning. You're listening to Grok Talk.
3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of Grok Talk, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
Grok Talk.
All right, we are back with Mark Osbourne, and of course Kimberly Morin's on the line with us. I'm Steve McDonald here with Mike Rogers. Marmar's here to supervise us again. I forgot to mention that. Remember, I said we needed a chaperone. Visit us at GraniteGrok.com. Please go to cnht.org to see what they do. Make a donation, help support the space that we're using, that they donate. Pretty much donate to us for free. We pay for the phone and the internet and stuff, but the rest of it's on them, and they could use the help. So let's continue the conversation. I had to interrupt Mike because I wasn't paying attention to the clock.
And Mike's always ready to go off on some rant or some tangent. The point I was making is these towns are stuck with these defined benefit plans and long-lived pensions, and not only that, but pensions and benefits that go on forever and ever, even after a relatively short working career. The only company I ever worked for that actually had a defined benefit plan went under, and that was Nortel. Mostly I've worked for small high-tech companies. I tend to get out when when the company becomes too bureaucratic, and they all have 401k programs or stock programs or something, but essentially it's a defined contribution program. And with those, the company can be or the town can be as generous as it likes in matching contributions, meaning putting in more on top of what the employee puts in, but at the end of the day, it's a savings plan, and the employee can walk away with it. But when the employee walks away with it, still earning interest or still accumulating stock value, the town has no further liability. And that's really the key. The problem with defined benefit programs is they get generous, they get more generous and more generous over time, and they stay with the employee until their death. And some of these trades, they're considered to be somewhat hazardous, and they can retire at, say, 45 or whatever. They got another 20 years of working life. They go off and be, as you say, a supervisor, a security guy, or even be a police commissioner in another town. And they can continue to build a second pension, and that town's going to be on the hook until they die. And, we don't have any anti-double dipping laws. But what I do believe is that, in a 401k program, and better yet, a rollable or portable 401k program, a defined contribution program that says, hey, if you leave us, you take the money with you, including, assuming you've worked with us for a couple of years, all the money that we put in, but we're not liable any longer. And by the way, you go take another job, you can keep pouring money into that defined contribution program, and you could retire and live extremely well. But we're not on the hook after you leave. And that's key. And, the sticking point, of course, would be, well, what about the health benefits after they leave? And, that would be something that would have to be negotiated. But the pensions...
Obamacare.
The pensions should not... Well, yeah, the unions fought for that until they were against it.
Until they realized it affected them.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. So my point is, unions should welcome a program as long as it's generous enough. But it's all present dollars. It's not future dollars that you're committing. The whole problem with towns buying peace it's essentially a very expensive form of appeasement. The whole problem with towns buying peace with the unions in exchange for very expensive future benefits is just like the federal government's debt. The current generation doesn't have to pay for them, but the town is stuck with them forever, or until it goes bankrupt, whichever comes first. And usually bankruptcy comes before forever.
Well, and I wanted to point out, too, that as par for the course with unions, they are ginning up their base. They're telling people all this, the sky's falling and all these bad things are going to happen. Do you know that they talked about, the town council talked about, because they won't compromise, they said, well, we could close this one certain fire department, and they, of course they flipped out, and, oh my God, you're not going to get your services. That one fire department they want to close is 1.4 miles from the central fire department. There's 4 fire departments in Derry, and it's a town of only 33,000 people.
What you need to say to them is, well, maybe we could make do with a volunteer fire department, guys.
Well, I think that yeah, really.
Sorry, I'm a little evil, and I realize that.
Well, look, it comes down to look, we can't afford it. So what do you want to do? Do you want to negotiate the overtime, negotiate the pay and benefits, or do you want us to fire these people?
Yeah, and they always say we want it all and we want it forever. And the response has to be, do you want do you want to get, say, 90% of something concrete, or do you want to get 100% of nothing? Because eventually it will be nothing.
The town administrator has sent out a letter to all of the unions saying the council has set a goal to reduce taxes by $2. That's going to mean some staff reductions. Can we talk about concessions so that we can try to save as many jobs as we can? And almost every union basically wrote back and said no. One union was so expressed to say we absolutely refuse to meet with you. And one union had said, well, we're always happy to come to the negotiating table, but no concessions were presented.
Do you, I know you have a 4-3 majority, which means you could have the votes to make the budget cuts that you need to make. When, as you mentioned early on, there's always intimidation, and the unions are going to go full bore against anybody they think is weak.
Oh, and they're certainly trying to go against everybody. Right now they're going against the ones who they think are strong on actually making these reductions. Earlier this week, I went to an office and I saw this younger blonde girl sitting at her desk, and she looked at me and said, "I woke up to you today." And I said, "Excuse me?" She said, "No, I woke up to you." I said, well, I'm pretty sure I would have remembered that. How do you mean? She said, "I turned on my Facebook, and as I do every morning," she said, "and I saw your picture and 2 of the other Derry Town Councilor photos. And the fire union had been good enough to put our information to be contacted and our photographs on their Facebook page, basically saying, contact these people night and day." And then, of course, you have all the likes and the comments. And what? They want to lower taxes. They don't care about safety. They're scumbags. Who's giving them money for their campaigns? Things like that. And so I think those photos are down now for whatever reason.
I have.
You have them. Yeah.
Oh.
Is David Lang living in Derry now? I mean, has he moved over from Londonderry? Because I know he's in charge of the firefighters in New Hampshire Union.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
So.
I know we're not. I mean, it's not a surprise. We're not the first councillors to whom this has happened when talking about lowering taxes. There were previous councillors in the past. One of whom is a county commissioner in Rockingham County now, Kevin Coyle. He was leaving the building one time, and a bunch of safety service-oriented folks yelled at him, "Good luck calling 911 when you need us." Another counselor, Janet Fairbanks, they put her all over obscene media.
Is that an actual threat to say, what, if your house is burning down, we won't come?
Well, those particular counselors took that as a threat, and they said to the fire chief and the town administrator at the time, "You know what? We don't know if this is a threat, but we're certainly happy to let the Attorney General or the federal government decide." And then that's when all that nonsense stopped with them. So this is not a new tactic, and I got to say, I've learned a lot about budgets and politics just through the last 3 weeks. I understand why we have a $19 trillion debt in Washington, D.C. I understand why taxes don't go down, because it's easy. It's easy to raise taxes a little bit and increase spending a little bit each year. But when you're taking on special interest groups and you're saying, you know what, yeah, it's nice to be generous, but it's always easy to be generous with other people's money, and that's the taxpayers' money. You take abuse when you're trying to lower taxes. I mean, that might be what the people want, but the people who are receiving that money, they pull out all the stops. We're just town councilors. We're part-time people, if you will. I mean, it doesn't feel like it, but it is. We go to work every day. We don't have time to get. We don't have the ability to get organizations and media responses and press releases. We're just trying to do the right thing.
Right, and you're learning for yourself the truth of the old saying that the special interests are concentrated and the opposition, of course, is diffuse. In other words, the people are diffuse; they want their taxes reduced, but the entities demanding the money and that the taxes not be reduced are concentrated, and they can apply pressure. And they do. Yeah,
they certainly do. Like I had said, when we initially had said, let's look at the $2.50 goal to reduce the taxes, 7 councilors, I mean, this isn't public, we knew what we were talking about, 7 councilors said, yes, let's look at that. And then the administrator came back and said, you know what, that might be too much too soon, can you amend your goal? And unanimously, all 7 of us said, yes, we certainly can do that, let's look at $2. And all 7 councilors said, yes, okay, let's make that the goal. And now we've got one councilor saying that they would never support that publicly, that individual saying it. We have another councilor who's saying to constituents by way of phone call, I would never support this cut. We have a new person who just got elected. To that person's credit, they weren't part of the initial poll, but he has said to the media just days after getting elected, I wouldn't support that. And so you've got at least 4 people who have said we're trying to stick to our goal, because that's what the taxpayers asked us to do.
It is, and it's tough because of that.
So these are people saying they won't support the cut, or that they won't. Just make sure I got my negatives the right way round. So
yes.
4 council members have walked away from the intent to cut.
Well, 2 that were there, before the last election, have walked away.
Yep.
Just said we're not going to support the $2 cut that we voted for before this pressure started cooking up. We have a new member who's just got elected and has said that he's not going to support a $2 cut. And
so
you have
3.
Yeah, 3 have just kind of
4 are in favor, 3 are afraid. Which is really the word for it.
Yeah, and that's true. Afraid is what it is, and very afraid in some cases, because they are truly intimidated.
Well, they go to the town council meeting, and they come in a big number, and they're loud, and they're obnoxious. They're typical union behavior, and they're very intimidating to other regular people in the town. And I've talked to the people that would like these tax cuts and are sick of this, but they're afraid to speak out. And that's because of the history and how the unions behave.
Well, let me ask you this. Does the moderator of the meeting ever ask the police to remove any of these louts from the room and arrest them, as they would do if any of you citizens spoke for 2 seconds too long?
Well, what happened was we haven't had meetings like this in 2 years, but because what's on the table is on the table, you had 200 people packing the meeting room and all of town hall, and I was wondering, what are the fire regulations, and but for this purpose, I guess it's okay. So
the fire chief was there supervising, so the fire regulations don't count.
And so the chairperson, I had been chairman for the last year, and that was the meeting where you elect new officers, and we had decided, look, there's no dictatorships here. We passed the gavel, and so our chairperson had been chairman for about 15 minutes, and so we had initially decided that, this is still where citizens come to talk and to speak to the representatives. No one had said we should have police ready to remove people, because honestly, we never thought that it would be necessary, and I still don't think it is. But we had one individual who's a former counselor get up at the dais, and we told everyone, look, a lot of people are here to talk, so you're going to get 3 minutes, and let's move on to the next person. And this former counselor decided he was going to try to exceed his 3 minutes, looked around, looked for some support, some clapping from the audience, and when he went to go beyond his 3 minutes, I was still feeling that chairmanship duty to quell it, and I jumped in and said, "Look, your 3 minutes are up. Time's up. Sorry." And I was very vocal in doing it, vocal enough that it made the New Hampshire news. I'm not sure why, but anyway. So I think the next meeting is just we know what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
That mob group mentality to some degree.
Yeah, and you have to tell them at some point the town will go broke if they continue to pile on benefits on top of benefits. That in any reasonable scenario, it's the lower ranks that get paid overtime, not the salaried supervisors. And if they want to preserve employment, let's have more people with less overtime, because you're paying 50% extra for those hours of overtime.
It's a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money.
My point is, if they're paying what we used to call time and a half, if they're paying 50% more per hour for those overtime hours, at some point you say, let's hire 2 more people and pay a lot less overtime, and it'll actually cost us less.
Yeah, but they won't do that because the reason they're doing the overtime is to make more money.
Right.
Well, that makes sense. That's why I would work overtime.
Well, that's true, and it's like salesmen and bonuses, and when the bonuses dry up, they move on. Well, you could only be so blessed that some of these would move on.
Right. What surprised me was the narrative that followed that meeting. I mean, you got 33,000 people who live in that town. Much of the populace has been talking about taxes for years, and because 200, I would say, many self-interested folks showed up who stand to not gain by these cuts, packed a room. Our local papers are saying, wow, this town council is blessed to have so many people saying, don't lower my taxes. And the town council should just basically cave and leave everything the same. And I just thought to myself, okay, I guess 200 people out of 33,000, the math doesn't add up for me.
And that's the number of union employees plus some family members or some agitators.
Why don't we run a poll on this? And the newspaper probably won't do it, but
Dairy News won't. Listen, Dairy News is owned by the corporate ownership of Dairy News is owned by unions.
Oh, so I was going to say let's outdo them, shall we? Why don't we put an online poll up on Granite Grok and then have the council advertise it and see what kind of support they get for lowering taxes versus raising it?
Yeah, you know what'll happen though. They'll get all, just like with the petition on MoveOn.org. They'll get, if anything is online, they'll send out a blast email to all their union members across the country and have them sign it. You know how that works. We already know their little game, which is one of the reasons I got involved with this, because I'm not a fan of public unions, especially when they try to bully people.
You've got 100 unions trying to hold 33,000 people hostage.
Yeah.
100 union people, whatever.
I'm just trying to think of creative ways this could be done. What if? How many of your taxpayers actually have their email addresses on file with the town?
Oh, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know. I know they write us all the time, but I don't know.
But if it's a good percentage, you know what? Write to them and see what response you get. See what percentage says raise my taxes.
These councilors ran for office on the idea of cutting taxes, and the voters picked them.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
And it is a hostage situation. It's a hostile environment.
Yeah.
These union people are holding the town hostage against ever cutting taxes again. Basically, that's the argument. We will never let you cut taxes. Forget it.
The argument is, don't cut, leave it the same. And the real complaint is, I can't believe this council is not spending more. We should be hiring more personnel is typically the argument that we've heard from our department heads for a long time. Our department heads still think that they're understaffed. And that's the argument they put forward. And again, if somebody had said to me when I was running, hey, Mark, you know what, we really want you to hire more people, or we want better roads, or we want something, then I would try to be responsive to that. But what I heard 2 years ago was, we need our taxes lowered because we can't afford to live here. And we have business owners who have said to me off to the side, I'll keep my business here, but as soon as my kids are out of school, I'm gone. And I hear that more often than not. And to not be responsive to that, then I shouldn't even be on the council.
Well, it's kind of the whole point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm presuming that especially the leaders here on the council were elected by large margins.
I'll tell you, I remember that I got 64% of the vote, and I had a contested election, and I was very clear about what I wanted to do. I know that one of the other fellows who's supporting this tax cut, he had a contested race that he won. So occasionally in Derry we have uncontested elections, but those of us who are trying to get this tax rate down, we had to campaign for it. We had to defeat an opponent, and we were very clear about what we would do.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, it sounds like a mandate to me.
Yeah.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. Obviously, the four of you remaining need to stick together and really stick to the plan. I mean, the taxpayers want you to cut the tax rate. And you need to fight for that because, and then they are going to throw everything at you. I mean, we just blog, but you never know. I mean, on any given day, you could put something up, and then the whole world is against you, just all of a sudden for no reason. And you're like, oh, cool, I know what button to push now, you know. You just learn. But in your situation, you have to live there, you know, and you have to make sure that, you know, you just, look, I ran to cut the tax rate. People said cut the tax rate. We want to negotiate those situations.
Yeah, I've always kind of been raised that if you make a promise, you keep it, even if you take some flack for it.
Kimberly.
I was just going to say, you know, what's funny is the unions are using social media, but the town council isn't. So, and you know my thoughts on social media. That's how stuff gets out there. And what's also funny is before, and I don't know if it happened exactly before my article came out, but there were 2 Facebook pages for dairy firefighters. 2. Now there's only 1. And they don't have that photos of the 3 counselors, you know, saying that, you know, they're doing this, and the other thing, although, like I said, I saved it. But because obviously, you know, I'm on social media pretty much 24/7 other than when I'm sleeping.
Which you didn't do last night, right?
Except for last night, because I actually did something other than be on the computer, yes. But they're taking to social media, and that's where you can hit the people in the town who might... What if somebody does read only Dairy News? Then they're just totally getting one biased side. I read the editorial from Dairy News. It's loaded with no facts, and it's completely one-sided. And there's other news in the area, London Dairy News or Nutfield News, I think, that will explain the facts. But who's believing what when you have this huge social media, you know, force out there? And like I said, I sent out my article, and when I talked to a person I know in dairy, they were on the firefighters, on the union side. After my article, they were not. It's all about getting the truth and the facts out there, because people don't know what's going on. They don't know the cushy benefits and deals that the unions are getting. And it's not, I don't blame the unions for wanting to fight for them, but there's got to be a point where taxpayers draw the line and say enough is enough.
And how much is there, I'm not 100% up on municipal law and the meeting rules and all that stuff. How much could you guys as counselors talk about the issue on social media?
I mean, there's certainly nothing to prohibit us from discussing it on social media.
Okay. So there is an opportunity there for folks to say, listen, this is our side of the argument. Taxpayers ask us to cut taxes. You know, here are the numbers. Anything that's public information, obviously. The overtime budget, you know, things that make people go, wow, you know, I'm paying that much, but why? Why am I paying $500,000 a year in overtime, whatever the number is? And yeah, I mean, Kimberly has the ability, being in the position that she's in as well as we do, to express these issues in ways that are a little bit more hyperbolic, perhaps, than the average town councilor might want to go. So, I mean, we do have that advantage, but Steve Coleman, I think it's Steve Coleman in Salem, you know, he talks about what happens at the town council on social media all the time. I mean, every meeting he's talking about it on social media. So I think Kimberly makes a good point.
Yeah, I think so. And as I say, nobody's looking for starving policemen or destitute firemen or anything like that. The question is, do you really need this much overtime? And if you do, why don't we have more bodies at the base pay rate, for example, and less overtime? You know, we'll move the money. We'll shrink your overtime budget and give you some salaried people instead. And you figure out how to make this work. And while we're about it, let's give the chiefs a small pay increase and say they're not eligible for overtime because people above a certain pay grade shouldn't be.
I agree.
Right. You're not the ones to do, on the ground, typically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're in their office.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, let's treat everybody properly here, and I say let's also figure out how this defined benefit scheme gets transmuted into a defined contribution scheme, because ultimately that's the only thing that's going to prevent your town going bankrupt, if not next year, in 10 years or 15 years' time. Because this overhang is just going to be there. It's like going around with a ball and chain, except the ball keeps on getting bigger and bigger. And there's only one way to stop it.
Right, and that's always been our concern, is it's just not sustainable. The rate at which we're operating is not sustainable. And so that's why we've been talking about this for probably 3-4 months. We have never been shy about what we're trying to do. A couple of people who don't like what we're trying to do are trying to say, well, you're not being transparent about it.
I don't know. We get meeting minutes. It's all online, probably.
Everything is online. Yep.
You could certainly say, well, I ran on cutting taxes. Here I am, cutting taxes. Again,
I just want to tell you how bad it is in dairy. In 2007, the tax rate was $22.05 per $1,000. In 2013, it was $31.49 per every $1,000. There hasn't been a change in the number of people in the town that would even call for that much of an increase in taxes.
And that's a combination of the municipal side plus the school side. So that's correct.
So let me ask this question, Mark.
Yes.
You got about 2 minutes.
Are we already seeing the effect of retiree benefits? In other words, what percentage of your payouts to police and fire personnel are people already retired? In other words, you're paying for dead weight at this point, or is this still mostly current pay and benefits that we're talking about in the budget?
How do you mean? I'm sorry.
Okay, well, look, because
I think it's current pay and benefits.
Yeah, because it's a defined benefit.
We're going to run out of time.
Because it's a defined benefit program. Really quickly.
Sure.
That means that when they quit working, you're still paying. So therefore, how much of your budget is paying for people that don't work there anymore?
I don't even know that number.
That would be a good question. And the way to pitch it to the unions is to say, in order to protect your future benefits, we need to move to a system where that money is escrowed, i.e. a defined contribution system.
It's always an option. They're not going to go for it, but
they never want to go for it. They want to soak the taxpayers until they are bled dry.
Right, and then when the entire pension system collapses and they don't have any money, it's too late then, right? They all riot, just like in Greece. Riots in dairy. No, I don't think we'll see that, but it is one of those things. Those unions are going to fight for it. That's what unions do. They're like, I don't want you to take that dues-paying guy away from me no matter what, and they're going to do anything to prevent it.
It's one thing to fight for it, but it's another thing to lie, not be honest with taxpayers, and be egregious in the false statements that you make that the taxpayers are going to lose out on any services. They are not.
Okay. Thank you, Kimberly. I'm going to let you go. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Happy
Bye.
Easter.
All right, Mark, thanks for coming in, spending some time with us, and we will close the show. Next week, we have Jody Underwood so far coming in, and somebody else I forget. We're going to talk about Croydon and a lot more. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, baby!
Raw Talk.